I was invited to my sister's birthday party and brought my girlfriend. My sister snorted, "So you really went full Dyke, huh?" Then my aunt said, "Your grandpa's turning in his grave." I wanted to leave. Until my grandmother took the mic and said, "Actually, he was gay too." The room froze. Last Saturday, I was sitting at a linen-draped table in the Cotton House, a fancy restaurant in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. It was my sister Fiona's birthday party, the first family event I dared to attend in years. Across from me sat Harper, my girlfriend of 4 years, nervously twirling her straw in her glass. She caught my hand under the table, squeezing it once. "You sure you want to stay?" she whispered. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure at all. Part of me was screaming to get up and leave, to run from the tight smiles and the sharp glances thrown our way the second we walked in. Another part of me, the stubborn one that had survived every family holiday, every loaded comment, refused to give them the satisfaction. If I'd known what was coming, maybe I would have left then. Maybe I wouldn't have sat there long enough for Fiona to humiliate me publicly. Or for Aunt Ruth to toss more gasoline on the fire. Or for my grandmother, sweet little Eloise, to stand up and set the whole room ablaze with a truth so big it left everyone stunned. When the invitation first came, I almost didn't open it. Fiona and I hadn't been close in years. She stayed rooted in the same old world values we were raised on, the ones I spent my 20s unlearning. Still, there was a polite note tucked in the envelope, and guilt, as it often does, got the better of me. Harper, ever patient, said she'd go with me. "You don't have to prove anything," she reminded me. "I know," I said. "But maybe it's time." The Cotton House glittered in the evening light, all white columns and sprawling porches. Inside, everything smelled like fresh magnolias and expensive wine. It was the kind of place you wore pearls to, or in my case, felt out of place at. I recognized almost everyone instantly. Aunt Ruth, perched near the bar, was already 2 glasses of red in. Uncle Silas leaned heavily into a conversation about real estate. Fiona's friends, a rotating cast of sorority sisters and junior league aspirants, milled about, noses slightly upturned. The second we walked in, conversation dipped for a heartbeat before picking back up again, louder, more performative. Harper gave me a small smile that said, "Ignore it." Fiona greeted us with a smile too tight to be sincere. She kissed the air near my cheek and introduced Harper to the table as Lila's special friend, the words brittle in her mouth. I let it go. I'd promised myself I'd let things roll off tonight. We made it through dinner. Barely. Every casual question aimed at me had a double meaning. "So, Lila, what's it like living that lifestyle in the city? Are you two planning to, make it official somehow?" Harper fielded them gracefully, her hand steady on her wine glass, her answers polite and noncommittal. I admired her for it. I was unraveling inside, even if I smiled on the surface. By dessert, the tension in the room could have snapped steel. That's when the toast started. Darren, Fiona's husband, said a few generic words. Something about how lucky he was to have her, how she made every room brighter. Polite applause. Then Fiona stood up, champagne in hand, grinning that grin she always wore before saying something cutting. "I'm so glad everyone's here tonight," she said sweetly. "Even my sister Lila. And her," she paused for effect, "her girlfriend." The room tittered nervously. She leaned in closer to the mic, pretending to be conspiratorial. "So you really went full Dyke, huh?" The laugh that followed wasn't genuine, it was sharp, a blade's edge disguised as humor. I felt Harper's hand go rigid against mine. For a second, I stared at Fiona, wondering if I'd heard wrong, if somehow I had misunderstood her, but no. Her smirk said everything. The blood drained from my face. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but before I could, Aunt Ruth, half drunk and red-faced, called out from her seat, "Your grandpa's turning in his grave right now." The words hit harder than I could have anticipated. Grandpa John had been a towering figure in our family, stern, stoic, everything a good man of his era was supposed to be. I grew up terrified of disappointing him, even long after he was gone. I felt small. Embarrassed. Furious. The urge to run overwhelmed me. Harper looked at me, waiting for my signal. We could leave. We should leave. I was halfway to grabbing my purse when Grandma Eloise, of all people, stood up. She walked slowly to the microphone, tapping it once with the edge of her manicured nail. The chatter died down immediately. She looked out at the crowd, her expression more serious than I'd ever seen. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, she began. Didn't think it was my place. But maybe it is. She paused, the silence stretching so long it became uncomfortable. John, your grandfather was gay, she said plainly. The room didn't just go silent. It froze. Fiona's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Aunt Ruth looked like she might actually faint. Someone dropped a fork. Grandma continued, voice unwavering. He loved a man once. Before me. His name was Edward. They couldn't be together, not back then. It wasn't safe. So he married me. We made a good life. Raised a family. But part of him was always somewhere else. She looked directly at Fiona then, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. So don't you dare use his name to shame anyone. He wouldn't have wanted that. There was no anger in her voice, only sadness, and something almost like pride. I sat there, stunned, Harper's fingers gripping mine tightly. Around us, the once buzzing party lay in shambles. No one knew where to look or what to say. Fiona sat back down without another word. Her face was pale. Aunt Ruth mumbled something about needing fresh air and stumbled toward the door. Grandma stepped down from the microphone, walking back to her seat with the slow dignity of a queen who had just leveled her court. And in a way, she had. After Grandma Eloise sat down, the silence stretched so long it became its own kind of presence. People shifted in their seats, glasses clinked against plates, forks were pushed around half-eaten slices of cake. No one seemed to know how to reboot the evening after. Harper leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear. Do you want to go? She whispered. I hesitated. Part of me screamed yes, get out, flee before someone said something else cruel and stupid. But another part, the part of me that had spent years swallowing my voice for the sake of this family, dug its heels in. No, I whispered back. Not yet. We stayed. Grandma, sitting back at our table, sipped from a tumbler of straight bourbon like she hadn't just detonated decades of family mythology. She caught my eye once, gave me a tiny nod. The kind that says, I've got you. Around the room, conversations picked up again, awkward and stilted. No one mentioned what had just been said, not directly. They talked about the weather, about an upcoming charity gala, about meaningless things, their voices pitched a little too high, their laughter a little too forced. Fiona disappeared at some point. I caught sight of her slipping toward the patio doors, heels clacking on the tile, head down. I let her go. I didn't owe her a rescue. Aunt Ruth, not as subtle, spent the next half hour downing another glass of Merlot, loudly lamenting how times sure have changed to anyone who would listen. Uncle Silas tried to change the subject, pulling out his phone to show blurry fishing photos to some bewildered cousin. Harper and I sat mostly in silence, eating small bites of cake neither of us had the appetite for. She kept her hand on my knee, grounding me. The weight of it was a lifeline. At one point, my cousin Miriam, the black sheep of another branch of the family, slid into the empty seat beside me. She was brave, Miriam said softly, nodding toward Grandma. You too. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded back. There was a strange kind of clarity settling over me, like the first moments after a storm when the sky is cracked open and raw. Everything I'd been afraid of, being judged, being mocked, being rejected, had happened. And yet, here I was, still breathing. I wasn't shattered. I wasn't destroyed. I was just free. Harper excused herself to the restroom, and while she was gone, Grandma reached across the table and patted my hand. He would have loved you, you know, she said quietly. John. He would have thought you were brave. My throat tightened. For so long, Grandpa John had been this towering figure of what I could never live up to. The thought that he might have understood me, might have even loved me for exactly who I was, hit me harder than all the cruelty combined. "Thank you," I managed to whisper. She smiled, her eyes crinkling. Took me a long time to understand him, too. Sometimes, it just takes time. Across the room, a few people were gathering their things. The party was breaking up. It wasn't the celebratory night Fiona had planned. The air was heavy, charged with things no one wanted to say. When Harper returned, she had a small, worried frown between her eyebrows. "Are we staying much longer?" she asked gently. I looked around. At the half-empty tables. At the forced smiles. At the cracked foundation of a family that had always cared more about appearances than honesty. "No," I said. "I think we've seen enough." Grandma kissed my cheek when I said goodbye. Uncle Silas gave a noncommittal grunt of acknowledgement. Miriam hugged me tightly and whispered, "Call me anytime." We walked out into the warm Charleston night, the scent of magnolias thick in the air. Harper slid her arm around my waist as we headed toward the parking lot, our heels clicking quietly on the pavement. Neither of us said much as we drove home. The city lights blurred past, the bridge over the Cooper River a ribbon of silver in the darkness. My mind replayed the night in scattered images: Fiona's smirk, Aunt Ruth's shrill voice, Grandma's fierce, steady gaze. And underneath it all, a quiet, stubborn pride that maybe, for the first time in a long while, I hadn't betrayed myself to make everyone else comfortable. The next morning, I woke up with the weight of the night still pressing against my chest. Harper was already in the kitchen, barefoot in one of my old college sweatshirts, making coffee like nothing in the world could touch her. I loved that about her, the quiet steadiness she brought into every room, even the ones where I felt like the walls were crumbling. I shuffled into the kitchen, still half asleep, and she handed me a mug without saying anything. We stood there in silence, the kind that felt safe. "You okay?" she finally asked, her voice soft. I thought about it for a long moment. Thought about the years I'd spent trying to fit into spaces that were never built for people like me. Thought about last night, and all the ugly things that had spilled into the open. Thought about Grandma's voice, cutting through it all with something solid and unshakable. "I think so," I said, and meant it. We had just settled onto the couch with our coffee when my phone buzzed on the counter. I almost ignored it. Part of me wasn't ready to deal with anything family-related. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, got the better of me. I padded back into the kitchen and picked it up. It was a text from Fiona. "Fiona, I'm sorry about last night. I don't know how to fix this. I was wrong." I stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly. I hadn't expected an apology. Definitely not from her. Not so soon. Harper glanced over the top of her mug at me. "Do you want to answer?" she asked. I didn't know. I turned the phone over on the counter, face down. "I don't know what I want yet," I said honestly. And it was the truth. For years, I had bent myself backwards to make things easier for Fiona. To keep the peace. To avoid confrontation. Even after I came out, some part of me still hoped she'd come around, that maybe eventually we could find our way back to being sisters. But now, I wasn't sure. I didn't know if forgiveness was supposed to come so easily. I didn't know if it was supposed to come at all. The day passed in a slow, sticky haze. Charleston in late spring has a way of sitting heavy on your skin, making you feel sluggish, like you're wading through molasses. Harper and I worked in the yard for a while, pruning the jasmine vines that were starting to overrun the back fence. It was good to have something physical to do, something to occupy my hands while my brain raced in circles. Around mid-afternoon, Grandma Eloise called. I smiled when I saw her name on the screen and answered immediately. "Hey, honey," she said, her voice warm. "Just wanted to check on you." I sank into one of the porch chairs, looking out over our tiny backyard. Harper was still out there, barefoot in the grass, pulling weeds with quiet determination. I'm okay, I said, meaning it a little more this time. I hope you know, Grandma said, her tone serious, that what happened last night, that wasn't about you. That was about them. About their fears. Their smallness. It had nothing to do with the kind of woman you are. I swallowed the lump that rose in my throat. Thank you, I said, my voice cracking slightly. We talked for a little while longer about the weather, about the new dog she was thinking of adopting, about anything but the gaping wound that still sat raw and open between me and the rest of the family. Before she hung up, she said one more thing. You decide what you want to do next, baby. You don't owe anyone forgiveness. Not if it costs you yourself. I sat with that after we said goodbye. Turned it over in my mind like a stone, feeling its weight. By evening, Fiona had texted again. Fiona, I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I realize now how cruel I sounded. I'm sorry. I miss you. It was short. Simple. No grand excuses. No promises that everything would be different. It surprised me how genuine it felt. Fiona was a lot of things, but she had never been good at apologies. It was almost easier when she was cruel when she was trying to be kind. It cracked something open in me that I wasn't sure I could close again. Harper sat beside me on the porch swing, her knee brushing mine. She didn't push. She just sat with me, waiting. I think I need time, I said out loud, mostly to myself. Harper nodded. Take it, she said simply. Take all the time you need. The evening faded around us, the sky bleeding into deep purples and blues. Fireflies sparked in the corners of the yard. Somewhere down the street, a radio played an old Sam Cooke song, low and sweet against the hum of the cicadas. I sat there, phone face down in my lap, heart wide open and hurting. And I realized, maybe for the first time, that healing wasn't going to look like some neat little bow tied over the ruins of last night. It was going to be messy. Awkward. Full of stops and starts. But it was mine. For the first time in a long time, the future, whatever it looked like, belonged to me. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet, honestly. Charleston buzzed along like normal outside our little house. Tourists wandered the market streets, kids laughed down by the waterfront, couples held hands under the dripping Spanish moss. But inside me, everything still felt unsettled. Like I was walking around with a wound nobody could see. I didn't text Fiona back right away. I needed space to hear my own thoughts, not just the ones soaked in family expectations. Harper gave me that space without question. She still held my hand in the evenings, still brewed my coffee just the way I liked it, still sent me stupid memes when I looked too serious for too long. She didn't hover. She didn't push. She just stayed. And it made all the difference. 2 days after Fiona's second text, another one came in. Fiona, can we meet? No pressure. Just, when you're ready. I stared at it for a long time. Turned it over in my mind like a splinter I wasn't sure if I wanted to pull out or let bury deeper. Part of me wanted to delete the message and go on pretending I didn't come from people who could wound you so easily. Another part, the part that still remembered growing up sharing a room with Fiona, sneaking out to the dock at night to talk about boys and dreams and the big, glittering world beyond Charleston, that part still wanted to believe she could be better. Maybe. Harper found me sitting out back that night, bare feet curled up on the porch swing, the text still open on my phone. She sat down beside me, close but not crowding. You thinking about seeing her? She asked. I nodded. I don't know if it's a good idea, I admitted. But I think I have to try. Harper bumped her knee against mine, a small smile on her lips. Then try, she said. If it hurts too much, you can stop. You don't owe her anything. And maybe that was the first time it really clicked that trying wasn't the same thing as forgiving. That meeting her didn't mean rolling over, didn't mean pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. It just meant showing up for myself. We agreed to meet at a little coffee shop near Colonial Lake, a neutral place, somewhere public enough that it couldn't get too ugly. I got there first, my nerves a tight, twisting knot in my stomach. I picked a table outside, where the breeze off the water could at least pretend to calm me down. When Fiona arrived, she looked small. Not physically, she was still the same tall, poised woman she'd always been, but there was something about her that seemed diminished. Like the armor she usually wore had cracked, and she didn't know how to patch it up yet. She hesitated at the edge of the patio for a moment, scanning the tables, before spotting me and walking over. "Hey," she said, voice soft. I nodded, heart hammering. "Hey." She sat down, folding her hands in her lap like she wasn't sure what to do with them. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The world moved around us, cars whooshed past, a woman jogged by with a golden retriever, the fountain in the lake burbled quietly, but we sat frozen in the center of it all. Finally, Fiona cleared her throat. "I was awful," she said, staring at the table between us. "At the party. I don't even know how to explain it. I was trying to be funny. I thought if I made a joke first, it wouldn't feel so uncomfortable." I said nothing. I let her sit in the silence, let her hear the weight of her own words. She twisted the napkin in her hands, a nervous tic I remembered from when we were kids. And then Aunt Ruth chimed in, and it just spiraled, and I didn't know how to stop it. I should have stood up for you. I didn't. I let them laugh at you." Her voice cracked on that last word, and she blinked hard, like she could force the tears back into her head if she just tried hard enough. "I'm so sorry, Lila," she said, finally looking up at me. "Not just for that night. For all of it. For not being there when you came out. For making you feel like you had to leave. For letting Mom and everyone else make you the problem instead of seeing that it was us." I stared at her. I didn't know if I trusted her yet. But for the first time, it felt like maybe she wasn't just saying the words she thought she was supposed to say. Maybe she was actually feeling them. "I needed you back then," I said, my voice low. "When I was scared. When everyone else turned their backs, I needed my sister." "I know," she whispered. "I know you did. And I'm sorry." We sat there in the heavy, painful space between apology and forgiveness, the gap so wide it felt like we might never cross it. But at least we were both looking at it now. At least we weren't pretending it didn't exist. The conversation drifted after that. Slowly. Awkwardly. We talked about safe things, work, old family gossip, the fact that Cousin Henry had apparently gotten a face tattoo, a dragon, of all things. We laughed once, tentative and brittle, but real. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it wasn't nothing, either. When we finally stood to leave, Fiona hesitated. Could I meet Harper sometime?" she asked, voice tentative, almost shy. I looked at her for a long moment, searching her face for any hint of cruelty, any sign that this was some elaborate performance. I didn't see any. Just a woman, my sister, trying, clumsily, messily, to do better. "Maybe," I said. "One day." She nodded, accepting that maybe was the best she was going to get for now. And it was. After that coffee meeting, things moved slowly between Fiona and me. Some weeks, she texted little things, trying to rebuild a bridge I wasn't ready to cross. Some weeks, I didn't answer. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I even wanted to. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped up neatly in a bow. It was messy and awkward, and that was probably the only honest way it could be. But even as Fiona tried, the rest of the family stayed exactly the same. Aunt Ruth, in particular, doubled down after Grandma's revelation at the party. Word traveled fast through Charleston's tightly wound circles, and soon enough, Ruth was hosting dinners for the real family, as she so graciously put it in a Facebook post I wasn't supposed to see. I didn't react. Not at first. I didn't want to waste another second of my life chasing the approval of people who would never give it. But Harper, my brilliant, quietly fierce Harper, had a different idea. We were sitting on the back porch one evening, sipping sweet tea and watching the fireflies come out, when she leaned over with a mischievous smile. "You know," she said casually, "there's a charity gala coming up in 2 weeks. One of Ruth's precious events." I raised an eyebrow. And, Harper said, setting her glass down with a soft clink, "you're on the invite list." I blinked. "I am?" Harper grinned. "Grandma made sure of it. She's a major donor this year. Requested your name personally. Can't exactly say no to the woman writing the checks." I laughed a genuine, startled laugh. "God, I love her." "So," Harper said, bumping her shoulder against mine, "you want to crash a party the right way?" I smiled slow and wide, feeling something deep inside me unfurl, something that had been coiled tight for years. "Yeah," I said. "Let's do it." The night of the gala, I wore a navy blue dress that fit like a second skin. Harper wore a tailored black suit that made every head in the room turn the second she stepped through the doors. We didn't slink in. We didn't try to be invisible. We walked through those grand double doors at the Charleston Society Club like we belonged there because we did. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. I caught sight of Aunt Ruth near the bar, clutching a champagne flute so tightly I thought it might shatter in her hand. Harper leaned close, murmuring in my ear, "Smile, baby. You're a scandal now." And I did. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. Fiona was there too. She stood near the entrance, watching us. Her face was unreadable for a long second, then she gave a tiny nod. Respect. Acknowledgement. Maybe even a little pride. Grandma Eloise, regal in her peacock blue gown, beamed when she spotted us. "My girls," she said proudly, kissing each of our cheeks. She pulled me aside briefly, her grip surprisingly strong for her age. "I'm glad you came," she said. "They need to see you. They need to choke on the fact that you're not broken." I squeezed her hand. "Thank you for making sure I was invited." She winked. "Oh, honey. Money talks louder than gossip." The rest of the night was delicious in a way I hadn't known I needed. People who had sneered at me at the birthday party now stumbled over themselves to smile politely, to pretend they hadn't laughed at my expense. Old family friends came up to shake Harper's hand, to compliment her on her sharp style and wonderful manners. The mayor, yes, the actual mayor of Charleston, spent 10 minutes chatting with Harper about architecture and urban development. And all Aunt Ruth could do was stand in the corner and watch it happen, her mouth pressed so tight it was barely a line. Every fake smile she threw my way was another tiny, satisfying victory. Every stiff handshake. Every awkward, stammering attempt at small talk. They had to see it. They had to see that I wasn't ashamed. That I wasn't hiding. That I had built a beautiful, full life without them and without needing their approval. And best of all? They had to see that their cruelty hadn't broken me. It had freed me. Toward the end of the evening, as the band played some old jazz standard and the dance floor filled with Charleston's glittering elite, Harper pulled me onto the floor. We danced under the golden chandeliers, slow and easy, like no one was watching. Though, of course, everyone was. As we swayed, Harper leaned down and whispered, "You did it." I looked up at her, heart full to the brim. "We did it," I corrected. Across the room, Aunt Ruth glared from behind her champagne glass. I smiled at her, a slow, deliberate smile, and then turned my attention back to the only person who actually mattered. Later that night, Harper and I walked hand in hand along the waterfront, heels dangling from our fingers, the city lights glittering on the water like spilled diamonds. "I'm proud of you," Harper said, squeezing my hand. I squeezed back. "I'm proud of us." And I meant it. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I wasn't fighting to be let in. I wasn't asking to be loved. I was already enough. I was already home.